Uh-oh, looks like I've been framed tonight. I need my lawyer. Hey there, everybody. It's me, the media guy. And if my bad Ernest P. Worrell impression wasn't a dead giveaway, I'm gonna be sharing my thoughts on an Ernest movie that I just got started watching for the first time called Ernest Goes to Jail. And yes, the title of the movie does suggest what's going to happen. Only a bumbling bank janitor like know-it-all knucklehead Ernest P. Worrell could serve on jury duty and wind up serving time. In the slammer! The laugh starts when a crooked lawyer discovers that Ernest is a dead ringer for his crime boss client, and before you can see framed, the switch is on. While Ernest is behind bars trying to fit in and break out, he managed to turn the big house into a nut house full of big laughs. Meanwhile, his evil double, also known as Nash, who bears a striking resemblance to Ernest, which is so uncanny, is busy taking his place at the bank and his girlfriend's life. Full of comic inventiveness, a wacky cast of characters, and slam-bang special effects, Ernest Goes to Jail is guilty of maximum fun in the first degree. Oh, I get it now. Okay, I gotta admit, that is a little bit clever. Now, despite the fact that I haven't fully caught up with every Ernest movie ever made, well, except for watching this and Ernest Saves Christmas, which I previously covered on the channel before, this movie totally lives up to its name as one heck of a funny movie that it has to be illegal, right? I'm just kidding. It does have a lot of funny moments, an interesting plot with a beginning, middle, and end, a very interesting casting choice of characters, and I will admit, the idea of Jim Varney playing two separate characters, namely his iconic character Ernest and his evil doppelganger Nash, does seem pretty believable. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when we were first introduced to Nash, his face was mostly covered up most of the time because I guess we weren't sure what he would look like until later on, until when we get to realize that he looked exactly like Ernest, which is quite uncanny when you think about it. Now, I'm not sure if Ernest and Nash were meant to be like, I don't know, twin brothers or something. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that would have been like the original idea, to have Nash and Ernest be like twin brothers or something. But I'm guessing that idea probably wouldn't even stick. Oh well. Although that probably would have been an interesting theory if you know what I'm talking about. Gotta admit, seeing Ernest get mixed up for his evil doppelganger, while Nash is trying to take control of Ernest's life, is quite crazy if you know what I'm talking about. Oh boy. I really felt bad for poor Ernest since he was mistaken for Nash in jail. I mean, granted, I can understand why everyone at jail thought Ernest was Nash, and why everyone in the bank thought that Nash was Ernest, because it is quite uncanny. Even when the other criminals in jail seem to realize the uncanniness of Ernest and Nash looking so alike. I gotta admit, Jim Varney does do a good job playing Nash in the movie. I guess he really knows how to play an evil villain in a movie. And I'm surprised he hasn't done a lot of other evil villain roles in other movies and TV shows during his career. I mean, sure, maybe playing a villain is probably not his thing, which I totally understand why. But it still would have been an interesting concept to have Jim Varney play some kind of evil villain or something. Who the heck knows? I was really surprised. It was quite funny how Charlotte, Ernest and Charlotte's boss, and the two security guards at the bank, played by the brothers, whose names somehow escape me, keep thinking that Nash was Ernest P. Worrell, which I'm guessing that was part of Nash's plan. For Nash to impersonate Ernest while he tries to think of a way to rob the bank. You gotta admit, that is quite sneaky, if you know what I mean. And I guess that really seemed to fool everybody. Because again, both Ernest and Nash really share some uncanny facial features. Which again, I'm still gonna go with my theory about how Nash and Ernest could be like long lost twin brothers, even if they don't straight up acknowledge it. Because again, I assume that's probably not the original idea for this movie. Because even if that was gonna be like the original plan, it probably wouldn't make sense because if Nash and Ernest were originally going to be like twin brothers, then at some point they would have at least recognized each other or something. Or were the talk of the family. You know, like one twin is good and while the other is evil. Oh well. That still seemed like a missed opportunity in my opinion. But then again, that is just a theory and a wild guess. I do like how at the beginning of the movie, when Ernest was trying to clean the bank floor, his hot wax machine was on the fritz and started making a huge mess. Even going so far as to drag Ernest along and having him dangling from the ceiling. Which I gotta admit, that's some heavy cartoon logic right there. And I'm guessing in real life, that would have been way too difficult and impossible in real life. Not to mention it wouldn't even make any sense. But this is just a movie. Most Ernest movies don't have to make a lot of sense or be perfect in my opinion. But still, sometimes this movie does have some funny moments. I really got a huge laugh out of the whole cleaning mayhem at the beginning of the movie. I honestly think that the entire casting crew must have had a real good time with this movie. And even though Jim Varney is already long dead, he still seems like a pretty cool guy to hang out with. Rather he's like a friend or a relative of ours. And to anyone who's like related to Jim Varney, or at least good friends of his, he must have been a pretty cool dude. If I was born like 30 or 40 years ago, I probably would have had a chance to meet Jim Varney in person at some point. Or at least work with him on some of his movie roles. And now how much of a cool dude he really is. Sometimes you can't win them all in life if you know what I mean. And I feel bad for not mentioning Jim Varney in my review of Atlantis. But at least I was able to dedicate him in the description of my review of Atlantis, The Lost Empire, which I might leave a link in the description down below. Yeah. So anyways, I honestly think Ernest Goes to Jail is one hilarious movie to watch over and over again. Although if I do have one complaint is they should have played the Jailhouse Rock song from the Blues Brothers. Since it is about Ernest going to jail by mistake while his evil twin is running loose. They still should have played Jailhouse Rock from the Blues Brothers during the end credits. I'm sure they probably didn't have. I guess they couldn't since then there probably would have been some copyright issues at some point. But sometimes you never know. So I'm gonna give this movie 5 police cars out of 5. Since that's how hilarious this movie is. And I highly recommend you guys checking out this movie at some point. And even if you might not be a big Ernest fan, at least you can have a good time with some of his movies. Especially this one, Ernest Goes to Jail, for example. I'm just saying.